This Tuesday morning, March 17th, 2026, something icy and calculated slipped through the doors of Clarence's house. And it didn't knock, it didn't warn, it simply arrived like a silent verdict already decided, wrapped in a cream-colored envelope sealed with power, the unmistakable red wax of Farah and Company. And in that single moment, the monarchy didn't shake, it shifted. The room didn't erupt, no voices were raised, no dramatic gasps echoed, but insiders say the air itself changed, heavy, suffocating, as if everyone present could feel it. This wasn't correspondence, this was containment. When that envelope reached Queen Camilla's desk, it wasn't opened casually, it was studied, almost feared, because the sender wasn't just a lawyer, it was Princess Anne, and she wasn't asking for anything, she was taking something back. And the words inside? Ruthless, immediate, final. The West Wing of Sandringham, 4 historic suites, a private corridor, a direct line to the Royal Library, sealed, locked, removed from circulation, not by request, not by agreement, but by law. In one cold surgical move, Princess Anne didn't just redraw boundaries. She erased decades of quiet understandings, those polite royal illusions built on nods and whispers, and replaced them with something far more dangerous: documentation, legal force, a signature that didn't blink. And here's where it gets chilling. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't personal. This was strategic. Because the mechanism she used, it traces back generations. A hereditary clause buried deep in royal property law, something so old it was never meant to be challenged, until now. Once activated, it freezes everything. No redesigns, no guests, no movement. Not even the queen consort herself can cross that invisible line. And suddenly, the question wasn't, why would Anne do this? But how long has she been planning it? Because this didn't happen overnight. This was prepared, calculated, timed. And that timing, it's everything. 5 months before summer, days before maintenance deadlines, just enough to ensure that no one, no staff loyal to Camilla, no planners, no architects could even step inside to begin transforming the space. It wasn't just a block, it was a shutdown, a complete operational collapse of Camilla's plans before they even began. And somewhere in that silence, a question reportedly slipped out, quiet, almost disbelieving: does the king know she is doing this? But the real answer wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be, because in that moment, something far more unsettling became clear. Maybe even the king couldn't stop it. Because this wasn't a family disagreement anymore. This was law versus influence, bloodline versus position. And for the first time in modern royal history, the queen wasn't in control of the room she intended to claim. But if you think this began with a piece of paper, you're already behind. Because the real fracture didn't start on March 17th. It started earlier, much earlier. 8:12 a.m., February 19th, 2026. A cold Norfolk morning, unmarked vehicles, police surrounding Wood Farm like a scene no one in the royal family ever imagined would become real. The arrest of Prince Andrew didn't just shake headlines, it shattered something internal, something unspoken. For 11 hours he sat in custody, and during those 11 hours, the monarchy split down the middle. On one side, Camilla, focused, controlled, pushing for distance, for image, for survival. On the other, Anne, silent, watching, calculating, already moving pieces no one else could see. Because while the public saw scandal, Anne saw something else entirely. A precedent. If one member could be cut loose for the sake of optics, who was next? And that's when everything started connecting. The police didn't just take a man, they took devices. 3 of them. Electronic, sensitive, potentially explosive. And suddenly, it wasn't about Andrew anymore. It was about information, about what could be uncovered, about what might already be known. And 2 weeks later, exactly 2 weeks, Anne makes her move on Sandringham. Not random, not reactive, precise. Because maybe, just maybe, the West Wing isn't just a set of rooms. Maybe it's something else, something older, something protected, something that needed to be sealed before anyone else got too close. Because insiders are whispering now that what Anne locked away isn't furniture. It isn't history, it's evidence. And if that's true, then this isn't a property dispute. This is containment. And the most dangerous part? The doors are already locked, the staff reassigned, the access is gone, and whatever sits behind those walls is now completely out of reach. And just when it seemed like the shock of that sealed envelope was enough to fracture the illusion of unity, the deeper timeline begins to crawl out of the shadows, and what it reveals is not chaos, but choreography. Because this didn't explode in a day, it unfolded over months, each move quieter than the last, each decision layered with intent, each silence louder than any announcement ever made. It started back in October 2025, a moment that looked administrative on the surface but felt personal beneath it. King Charles stripping Prince Andrew of everything that still tied him to the royal structure. Titles gone, honors erased. But the real blow wasn't symbolic, it was physical. The eviction notice, the removal from Royal Lodge, that was the first crack. The first time bloodline security was replaced by conditional loyalty. And from From that moment, something shifted in Princess Anne's mind, because what she saw wasn't discipline, it was a vulnerability. If one brother could be displaced, rewritten, relocated, then nothing was sacred anymore. And by December, the palace atmosphere had already begun to rot beneath its polished surface. While the public was told stories of stability, behind closed doors there was something far more fragile taking shape. A king scaling back treatment, a reduced presence, a growing reliance on voices around him. And in that quiet vacuum, power doesn't disappear, it migrates. On one side, Camilla, positioning, organizing, stepping closer to the center. On the other, Anne, pulling strings that no one could see, building a legal foundation instead of a public one. And then, February detonates everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but surgically. The police raid, the devices seized, the interrogation, and less than 24 hours later, something almost invisible to the public but devastating to anyone paying attention, a proposal lands. A multi-million-pound redesign of Sandringham, a transformation plan, a reinvention of space. And that's where the story stops being coincidence and starts becoming strategy. Because to Anne, that proposal wasn't about interiors, it was about territory, about control, about rewriting the meaning of a place that wasn't just a house, it was memory, identity, legacy. And the timing, while the family was still reeling, while attention was diverted, while defenses were down, that's when Anne moved. Not emotionally, not publicly, but legally. March 5th, 2026. Farah and Company. Documents signed. Clauses activated that hadn't been touched in decades. And suddenly, what looked like quiet tension turned into something far more permanent. A barrier, a line, a point of no return. But if you follow the trail further, it becomes even harder to ignore what's really happening here. Because at the exact same time, something else disappears. Ray Mill House, Camilla's private sanctuary, sold. Quietly, almost too quietly. And that single move might be the loudest statement of all. Because when someone gives up their only independent refuge, they're not stepping back, they're stepping in, fully, permanently, anchoring themselves inside the system. And Anne saw it. Immediately, not as loyalty, but as integration, as permanence, as something that couldn't be reversed once completed. And that's when the West Wing stopped being optional. It became critical, because that space isn't just architecture, it's history. It holds correspondence, artifacts, records, things that predate every modern narrative now being built around the monarchy. And if those things were to be accessed, altered, reinterpreted, then the past itself could be reshaped to fit the present. And Anne, she doesn't allow history to be rewritten, she preserves it, guards it, locks it if necessary. And that's exactly what she did. But the most dangerous part of this entire situation isn't Anne's move, or even Camilla's response. It's the silence in the middle. The silence of a king who, by law, holds ultimate authority, and yet, in practice, appears frozen between two forces he cannot reconcile. Because if he overrides Anne, he risks dismantling the very legal traditions that protect the monarchy itself. But if he sides with Anne, he isolates the one person who stands beside him in every public moment, every private struggle. And so he does nothing. He listens. He waits. He watches as lawyers replace conversations and documents replace trust. And that silence, it's not neutral. It's pressure. It's absence. It's the kind of vacuum that allows something far bigger to form underneath. Because now, this isn't just a disagreement. It's a standoff with 3 possible endings, and none of them are clean. A full legal war that drags secrets into the open. A cold freeze where the estate becomes a symbol of division, or something quieter, more calculated, where one side retreats publicly while preparing something far more damaging behind the scenes. And if history tells us anything, it's that the quiet moves are always the most dangerous. Because while attention stays fixed on locked doors and sealed rooms, something else is being overlooked. A clause, buried, almost invisible, hidden inside a 14-page legal filing that very few have actually read in full. And that clause doesn't just grant control over space, it grants access, exclusive access, to the private basement archives of Sandringham, sealed since the era of King George V. And now, the question changes completely. Because this isn't about who stays in which room anymore. It's about why those archives mattered enough to secure at this exact moment. Why they had to be locked down just days after those devices were seized. Why Anne moved not toward visibility, but toward restriction, toward containment, toward control of something no one else is allowed to see. Because if what's inside those archives connects to what's on those devices, then this isn't a family dispute. It's a timeline, a sequence, a puzzle where every move points to something buried deep enough to stay hidden for decades, until now. And as the deadline of April 15th approaches, something else becomes impossible to ignore. The tension isn't decreasing. building. It's a building, quietly, relentlessly, because behind those locked doors, behind that sealed wing, behind that single signature that changed everything, there is something waiting, something protected, something that made Princess Anne risk everything, her relationship, her reputation, even the fragile balance of the monarchy itself. And the most unsettling part, no one outside that legal boundary knows what it is. Not the staff, not the press, not even, some say, the king himself. And if that's true, then this story hasn't reached its peak. It hasn't even revealed its core.